Imagine a day where children are guided and nurtured in a way that honors their unique humanness. A day where, instead of being expected to change in order to fit in, children can be met right where they're at. Welcome to Where They're Planted, a podcast for parents and care providers of unique children. Caring for a child with a developmental, emotional, or behavior challenge, a neurodiverse brain, or difficult early life experiences can be confusing and exhausting. On this podcast, we'll help your child flourish and strengthen their roots by helping you not only understand them, but also gain the skills to help them bloom where they're planted. We'll use brain science, nervous system tools, collaborative strategy sessions, and a deep understanding of the developmental process to create a fertile environment around your child in order to nurture their growth. I am your host, Jen Bluske, an occupational therapist with over 25 years of experience and a parent coach. My most closely held title, however, is that of a single mom of 2 thriving adopted kids, so I have walked this walk. I am truly excited to share, teach, and dive into these important topics on each episode.
Welcome back to Where They're Planted. We are here today in another solo episode, episode 13. We are going to talk today about regulating yourself as a parent. I have alluded to this episode for so many weeks and wanted to give you guys the time today as parents and caregivers in order to focus in on ourselves. Today isn't going to be about a self-care day, but what I really want to hone in on is looking at our nervous systems as parents. What I always tell my parents that I work with privately is that you are the best tool. You guys are the tool to shifting your child and to supporting your child, especially if they're working through some of their own dysregulation. And let's be honest, all kids are dysregulated beings. They are still learning this stuff. And so by taking a minute, taking a pause to focus on your patterns, your regulation states, your strategies, sensory strategies, calming strategies, beliefs about using strategies, set points in your own system, we can move forward and really being that strong foundation to support our kids right where they're at. And so the way I want to think about this and the information that I think that would be most useful is actually to circle back and just remind everybody of what we talked about. I think it was in episode 3 or 4 around nervous system development and our states of being in the world. And so when I talk to parents about how we help our kids regulate and how we help our kids stay calm, I usually use polyvagal theory. Polyvagal theory was coined by Stephen Porges. If you're looking for more information, I'll leave a little bit of information in the show notes if you want to dig deeper. But polyvagal theory kind of talks about the 3 main states our brain moves in and out of in order really to function and to keep ourselves safe. So this is under thinking, this is under problem solving, this is how we move through our world. And it's sort of let's say it's a hidden thing that we don't talk about much, and it's so obvious when you start to see how people are moving through the world. And so I just want to go through these 3 states. And the reason we're doing this, if your kids are in OT or in maybe some other types of therapy, you might have heard about this in relation to their systems. And I think sometimes where we as professionals and frankly as sort of parenting guides make a misstep is we focus so heavily on the kid's state, but we sometimes forget that the parent's state is in large part what informs our kids' states. And so we're going to review this again from the place of you as the parent. And so these 3 states that I talk about, their big words are ventral vagal, dorsal vagal, and sympathetic, right? So those are the neurology words. Ventral vagal is our safe and alert state. So our safe and alert state is where we know we're okay. It's where we want to be. much of our days. It's where we can engage. It's where we can learn. It's where we can play. It's where we can make dinner and have a conversation with our partner at the same time. It's where we can really walk through the playground with our kids and hear what they're saying and respond in a joyful way. It's where we are able to often do our work or whatever we do during the day or the work of running a household. It happens most easily when we're in a ventral vagal state. We know we're safe in this state. And so I want you as parents right now just to take a minute and think through activities, environments, humans you're around when you might be feeling what I'm describing of this state. So I know for me, ventral vagal happens most easily in two places: when I'm outside and moving my body, not quickly, but just when I'm moving, like walking or when I'm on water or when I'm hiking, I can get myself to a ventral vagal state pretty quickly. Now, I can't always be doing that all day long, but that is where I kind of know that I feel ventral vagal. Another place is when I'm engaged in something like a game, like a board game with trusted people, or when I'm sitting around dinner with trusted people. That's another place that I'm often in a really ventral vagal state. I know that I'm connected, I'm safe, I'm engaged. I can feel all of my body, which we'll talk about a little bit more because that's something that not all of us adults are able to do anymore. So that's a ventral vagal. So, take a minute, after this podcast and just think about where are you in ventral vagal? Like, what are the circumstances around that for you? The next state we like to think about is sympathetic. So our sympathetic state is vital. It's important for us to quickly be able to respond to danger. It's our state that mobilizes us. It's our flight or fight. It's our state that activates us for action. Let's say, for example, that if our child runs out into the road, we are going to want to activate and we are going to want to get them and move them quickly. We have to move fast. It's the state that, in a more playful way, if you play sports or run distances or do any activities like that, it is a sympathetic state. It's a state where we're mobilizing. We're a little bit more active. Our brain is a little bit more active. And so this, while important, is also someplace that our brain and our bodies are not set up to live in all the time. So I want you to think about for a minute, when I describe the sympathetic state, what environments, what scenarios, what humans do you tie to a sympathetic state in your nervous system? The body sensations that often happen in a sympathetic state are, we might get like sort of that rush of tingly. That's actually adrenaline coursing through our veins. We might get a knot in our stomach. We might feel like we've just got to lash out, right? This is where like we just like, I can't handle it anymore. I'm going to shout might happen. And so thinking about when sympathetic state pops up for you. Again, for myself, a sympathetic state might pop up if I'm in a relationship and in engagement, especially with a child, my children, when there's sort of a verbal confrontation that pushes at if I'm a good mom or not. That will quickly move me into a sympathetic state. Another place that will move me into a sympathetic state, again, I use nature a lot, but is when I am like climbing up, like climbing a hill or climbing up. That activation that happens because your muscles are working so hard can move me into a sympathetic state, which is a little bit more functional, right, in that state. It's not necessarily functional to be in a sympathetic state when we're having a verbal confrontation or a verbal back and forth with our children. And then the third state that we're thinking about, again, I've described these in the relation to our children, but we haven't talked about them in relation to ourselves yet, is our dorsal vagal. So this is our freeze. This is our collapse that our brains can do and do, again, in order to create safety. Dorsal vagal, it's described as, right, the possum is going to get eaten anyway, so it freezes. It just plays dead. It pretends it's not in existence. It might dissociate, right? It might just check out. If we think about our freeze states, Again, there's functional places and less functional places. And right now, we're just labeling them. What I find is that we just have to know what they feel like in our body before we can make choices around what we want to do about it. So a freeze state, what environments, what interactions, what activities might pop us into a freeze state? I know that for some of us, when there is something really, really scary that happens, right afterwards, we might go into a freeze state. I know that a freeze state might happen after a really intense day where we're just like stuck on the couch. I don't know if anybody's had that experience of just being stuck on the couch on your phone and like unable to go actively do the 25,000 things on your list. That's a freeze state. A freeze state might be that you're having an engagement and you just can't find any words. Your words have shut down, right? So we see this in our kids, but we also experience it in our own bodies because we are also human. So this doesn't just happen to kids. This happens to us all. And the power of really inherently knowing your own nervous system is the tool to shifting our kids, is the tool to showing and modeling and engaging around an adaptive nervous system. And so I want to speak just a little bit more on dorsal vagal, or that shutdown, that freeze state, because a lot of us adults are living in a dorsal vagal, in a freeze state at this point. It's called a functional freeze, meaning like, yep, we're able to get life done, but are we feeling or experiencing any of it? So I don't know if you guys have ever had the experience of driving to work and not remembering actually the drive there, or even more specifically, knowing that you got through your day, but you don't remember any of the details of it. So that's a functional freeze state. And so just like our kids, when we start creating safety in that nervous system, and for us adults, safety in the nervous system means maybe sometimes I have choice, right? Sometimes maybe means I can care for myself by taking the time to go get a glass of water. Might mean I can be safe in actually feeling the sensations and the emotions that are happening in my body. And so as we move through and out of sometimes that dorsal vagal, that freeze state, the road can be a little wild because we have to move through sort of an activation period. We have to move through getting it out of our bodies. And so I really like parents to think about kind of what that experience feels like in their body. And here's why we're talking about this first today. Is our job as parents is to help our children be able to move through all of these states and have some ability to have control or have autonomy over, like, whoa, that really freaked me out. I really moved into a fight flight state, but I can calm down. I can get through this. I can get back to a safe and connected state. Now, we don't like think about this in words. And actually, we can think about this in words, but the most effective way to think about it is actually through experience. And so I know in our work with parents and kids, we're not just talking about what happened when you got mad and next time you should use your square breathing or your calming strategies, which are good. But the brain that's in either a fight, flight, or a freeze state isn't able to access those strategies because it requires your frontal lobe. It requires your thinking brain, which isn't on at the moment. Again, which is why you as parents being I can shift my state, which will help you, kiddo, come back is vital. Now, this doesn't mean that as parents, we're never going to move into a fight flight state. Our goal and my hope of why you're showing up here today is that you have more option. You have more choice. You can make a decision around like, is this the response I want to be giving right now? Which usually is no, right? There's a much more functional and useful way to respond to our kid than through fight flight. Usually there's a much more functional and useful way to respond to our children than freeze, which is shut down, I don't care, leave me alone. But the step before that is really understanding. It's understanding like what in the world is happening in my body, because then I have choice. then I can make a different decision as opposed to letting my nervous system take over for me. It's interesting because I would do so much work around regulation with kids, right? I'm an OT with 25 years of training, and all of my work has circled around regulation and sensory processing and emotional regulation with children. And as I've gone through my career, and then it's paralleled actually with my parenting in an interesting way, the key to shifting those nervous systems of our children, which often means the behaviors of our children, is how connected and regulated I can get the parent. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all on you. What it means is we have to have the parent to come along in the process, especially when our kids are under about the age of 12, because their brains aren't developed enough to do it independently yet. So when you think about supporting our unique children, it's sort of a philosophy shift. And it's a philosophy shift that we're actively marching through at our clinic, at our in-person clinic, and through our parent coaching work. So I want to give you guys just some to-dos. I want to give you some things to think through today as we sort of shift the focus and give you some time to process how you're feeling in your own bodies. Know that we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking for an always calm and always connected parent. That's just not real, A. And B, it doesn't show our kids that there's variation in nervous system. It's not real. What we are wanting to show our kids is that you have the ability to move through states. And so I've alluded to this a little bit. One acronym that I have been taught through my parent coaching work is called ANCHOR. I use this one a lot because it's just a way to think through as an adult what you need to do to come back and reconnect in with your child from this nervous system place. So the first part of ANCHOR is A, and it's awareness of your body. And so when I do my work with parents, I'm finding, and I also experience this with in my own parenting, that if we don't have awareness of what's happening literally inside our bodies, we don't have anything to go off of. We don't have any information. The information often is like out there. The information is they did this, and so therefore I am mad. What I mean by awareness in our body is I'm feeling like my arms are shaking. I'm feeling like there's a fire in my belly that's rising up through my chest in this moment. I'm feeling like my legs are 1,000-pound concrete blocks and they can't move. I'm sensing that I want to scream. I'm sensing that my stomach is in knots. That's what I mean by awareness of the body. And I'll be really honest with you, in today's society, most of us adults have turned that off. We turned that off because in our early upbringing, maybe we were encouraged not to pay attention to our emotions unless they were happy. We turned it off maybe because we're a parent to a child who needs so much from us that attending to ourselves at the same time feels a lot like too much. We turn it off because when we experience it, our needs aren't getting met anyways, right? This isn't unlike our kids. And so I encourage you through this work to turn it back on. And you're able to turn it back on and then turn it back off when it gets to be too much. You could be like, whoa, I got a lot of stuff coming up. I'm really I've got fire in my belly. My arms are shaking. That's a lot of mad. I'm going to just turn that back off for a little bit. You have control. But we do need to be able to sense what's happening in our bodies. And so if you're a parent who has any movement practice within your repertoire, and what I mean by any movement practice, I mean any movement practice, all the way from like the yogas to the mowing the grass to the going to the gym to walking the dog. Any movement practice will be supportive of this. The second thing I'm going to have you do is name. So this is the N of ANCHOR. I want you to name what's happening for yourself. Whoa, there's a fire in my belly and my arms are shaking and I feel like I want to scream. I think I'm really angry that my child just said that to me. I'm really angry. I've got a lot of anger right now. Or I feel like there's a ton of bricks in my feet and I can't move and everything is cloudy and I can't really feel my arms. I'm really shut down. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. We don't need to fix it. We just need to label it. What I find is that once parents can label it, the fix comes on its own. It's really about the labeling that is the key to shift. It's the key to starting to kind of cue into our nervous systems. The third thing is connecting into your sensory calming tools. And so, what I mean by this is we all are sensory beings. We all use the 8 sensory systems in order to organize ourselves, not just our kids. Ours just tend to be a little bit more subtle, unless you're right, like a skydiver, ultra marathoner, or somebody who does really intense things, then I could probably point to they're less subtle. But either way, they're still important, is to really look at our sensory calming tools. What works for us from auditory, from visual, from movement, from taste, from touch perspective, and what doesn't work for us? I find that a lot of times we have some very, very sensitive parents whose touch systems are very sensitive and very tuned in, and they're parenting a child who needs a lot of intensity and a lot of touch. So they're getting overtouched during the day, right? It's disorganizing their nervous system, but their child needs it. So then what do? What we do is we get really good at being aware and being really good at supporting our nervous systems in other ways. I will also add to the show notes a link to some of the sensory calming tools that parents use. And these are just a tipping off point to get you guys thinking, but we do want to know what works for you. Okay. And I'm not talking about big, giant things. In this podcast, I'm never talking about take 30 minutes and do this for yourself. I mean, again, that's wonderful if you have that available to you. Typically, I'm talking about something you could do while you're with your child or something you could do in a natural transition point, right? A drive in the car, in the shower, things where you're already doing it anyway, activities that you can add into that. Third in the anchor is honor the process. What I mean by this is learning to regulate your own nervous system while helping your child who might be really dysregulated to learn to regulate theirs is a process. It takes time. And so honor the process means I want you to think about this in like a 3 to 6 month trajectory. I want you to think about that right now we're just curious and we're experimenting. We're not necessarily expecting it to get 100% better right now because it's not going to. Because it takes time for shift and change in our nervous systems to settle into new patterns. And so honoring the process of how you maybe go from every time your child dysregulates to being in a fight-flight state and getting really big to maybe in 6 months when your child dysregulates, you have a window of 30 seconds before that sympathetic fight-flight kicks in. And in that 30 seconds, you now have choice. You now have options rather than just moving into fight-flight. That's the shift we're looking for. That's the process we're looking for. The O is open to connect. So what that means is once we have centered into ourselves, we are then available to connect in with another human, our child. And so this ability to move through and have flexibility in our nervous system to find that safe and connected place and then be available to connect is the teacher for our child of how they are to do this as they grow and develop. Because we're not all organized and regulated all the time. That's not realistic. It's not how our brains are set up to function. We move through the stages and then we have an opening to connect. And our child goes, oh, look at that. Mom, dad, caregiver, look, they figured that out and now they're here for me. Wow. Which segues beautifully into rupture and repair from last week, right? Now we're able to repair. And then lastly is you're going to focus on the present moment, right? You're going to take care of yourself in these first couple steps of anchor. And now you can land back in the moment of whatever happens to be going on in this moment, right? If this is a big meltdown that you're in the middle of, if this is a decision you have to make, if this is, all right, now here we are and I've got to get this child out the door and I know it's going to be challenging. I have to have this day and it's really intense and long and there's 52 transitions and I'm overwhelmed. Whatever it is, now we can land back to the present moment because now we are in a place where we have our frontal lobe on and we can problem solve. We can use those executive function skills that we need as adults, and we can model and support the executive function skills for our kids. And so anchor awareness of body, name what is happening, connect to your sensory calming tools, honor the process, be open to connect and refocus on the present moment is the steps we take over and over again in order to learn how to regulate ourselves as the parents, as the adults, in order to be there for our kids. I think I'm going to leave it there for today. I hope that this maybe tipped off a few nuggets for you or a few wonderings in your system. As always, if you want to connect in with me or with my team, you are welcome to reach out to our parent coaching work in our show notes, and we're happy to have you. Thanks so much. If you like what you heard today, check out our Empowered Parent Coaching course offered through Thriving Parents Collective. In this course, you will get videos and course content to help you learn and develop the strategies you seek to meet your child right where they're at. Go to the show notes for the link. Where They're Planted is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Jen Bluske. Music is by Gaston Reen and Pod 5. Thank you for loving your child right where they're planted.